Hi and welcome to the channel. Today we will unbox a peculiar graphics card which is the ASRock Challenger ITX Intel Arc A380. If you have just woken up from your cave, Intel makes discrete GPUs now. A380 is also their first release and this is an entry-level card. My first impression on the name is why did Intel partner with an aircraft manufacturer? But to explain the naming further, A is their first GPU release, so in the event that they will release another GPU, it will be called B something. The 3 here is like their Intel Core series, like i3 for their entry level. They also have an A770 and A750, which are supposed to be their high-end cards like the Intel i7s. So with that, I suggest to Intel to create a B777 if they will have a next iteration. Looking around the box, we can see some specs. So this is the GPU itself, and the memory is GDDR6. It did not mention any capacity, which is 6 gigabytes by the way. And then output ports, 3 display ports and 1 HDMI. As the name implies, this is good for SFF PC, which coincidentally is a focus of this channel. 0 dB silent cooling, also known as fan stop, and super alloy graphics card, equipped with high quality components to maximize the performance and reliability. I won't be able to validate that and I'll call it marketing for now. At the right hand side, there are some Intel features. XeHPG microarchitecture. This is basically Intel's counterpart for CUDA or RDNA. XeSS, which is an upscaling technology, also known as AI-generated pixels. This is Intel's counterpart for DLSS and FSR. Personally, I'm not a fan of that feature. And DX12 Ultimate, which is what most new cards provide nowadays anyway. So let's talk about the minimum specs. The most notable part here is the 10th gen Intel Core processors or higher, with compatible motherboard supporting resizable bar, AMD Ryzen asterisk 5000 series processor or select AMD Ryzen asterisk 3000 series processors, with AMD 500 series motherboard supporting smart access memory. So a few things in this statement. First is the asterisk after Ryzen and in some parts of the specs as well. And second, which I have to emphasize, is the modern CPU and motherboard requirements, because it is highly recommended to have a resizable bar feature or ReBAR enabled.
Turn it on.
So will this GPU work without ReBAR enabled? Yes, it will, but expect a performance hit, which I will tackle later on.
Texture's more sensitive.
Opening the box. The GPU is padded by a thick foam and underneath is the GPU already. Underneath the foam padding is an important notice in English and Japanese. There's also a QR code here which will give you more information, but mostly on the importance of ReBAR.
Turn it on.
Then a quick install guide in many languages. I'm not sure why was it underneath the foam. Usually it is on top of the GPU, especially if it's so-called important notice. But anyway, it's not my design. So this is the GPU itself. It has a single fan and as told earlier, it has a fan stop feature. Dimensions are 190mm by 124mm and it has 2 slots. As also told earlier, there are 3 display ports and 1 HDMI. There's no backplate, which is fine, and it requires an 8-pin power connector. The PCIe has cover, which is nice. The slot size has 16 lanes as a standard for GPU, but it will only utilize 8 lanes, which is fine for this entry-level graphics card. As for the cooling, it uses a basic heatsink solution that is typical for an entry-level graphics card. This solution is overall okay as the temps averaged at 64.36 degrees Celsius while benchmarking. It was also quiet enough. The hums can only be heard if you really put your ears next to the fan. As for the benchmarks, I will show you 2 entries for this GPU. One is without ReBAR and another with ReBAR enabled. As for SF5 benchmarks without ReBAR, I noticed a few stutters. That's why it wasn't able to play constantly at 60 FPS. However, this will be fixed with ReBAR enabled. Just take note that I will not include SF5 in my summary since this can't fully represent the performance of the graphics cards. As for Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy, I want to say that this GPU performed badly for some reason in this title. So I did not bother to finish the run without ReBAR. And even with ReBAR enabled, it was just 12 FPS. Okay, as a summary, based on the games I benchmarked, Intel Arc A380 without ReBAR and without considering Guardians of the Galaxy performs 3.79% faster than the GTX 1630, which is kind of negligible. If I will include Guardians of the Galaxy, then GTX 1630 is just infinitely better. If you enable ReBAR, you will gain 37% on average, or infinitely better if you consider Guardians of the Galaxy.
So turn ReBAR on.
Against the GTX 1650, the 1650 is better by 59.93% versus Arc A380 without ReBAR and 15.61% with ReBAR, or 52.76% if you consider Guardians of the Galaxy. As for games like CSGO and Valorant, I don't have a definitive benchmark since there was no benchmark tool built into the game. But as far as I could tell, this is playable in CSGO with stutters. This is true if I pan out fast, but if I am just playing casually, then this is just fine. I won't be able to notice that I am playing with an Intel graphics card. As for Valorant, it was doing well and didn't experience notable issues, although the graphics card performance didn't translate to us winning. One particular nuisance for me with this GPU is its integration to current software that I use. I've actually set up MSI Afterburner way before to monitor GPU temps, but for some reason, it is not available with Arc A380. Next is its integration with OBS. I know that Intel Arc has AV1 encoding and decoding. This was a big deal in other channels. However, it is not available with OBS. This is one of the so-called advantages of this GPU that I can't take advantage of. Also, during the first install of the driver, my PC lost its display. I needed to restart the system for it to respond. Luckily, upon restart, the driver was already installed and there was already a display. Lastly, I don't know how many games will have issues like Guardians of the Galaxy. But upon startup of that game, the game warned me that I did not have the latest drivers. But upon checking, I already have the latest gen driver. Again, this is one of those nuances for paying to be a beta tester. As for overall recommendations, if you have 10,000 pesos or 170 US dollars, and if it is not too much to ask, save 5,000 pesos more or 85 US dollars to get an RX 6600. My reason is that it is very cheap now with a very good performance compared to the competition. That's like paying a 2060 Super or a 2070 for 15,000 pesos or 255 US dollars. However, I understand that the budget is limited to most. So currently, for most use cases, I would suggest getting an RX 6400 or a GTX 1650 for more bang for the buck GPU. If Intel will sell this for 8,000 pesos and you can close an eye for its risk, then it's probably okay. Probably. I'm not so sure. I talked about risk. So the risk of getting this card would be first is incompatible to your game or software, and second, which is the most important one, is Intel abandoning this project. This is a risk because if you're going to buy this card, you're actually investing that Intel will make better drivers in the future. However, I do really hope that Intel gets better. As Filipinos know that duopoly is really bad. However, I just don't like spending money to become Intel's beta tester. Okay, I think I've talked a lot about this topic already. Thanks for watching. Do like or dislike, comment on what you think about this GPU, and subscribe for more unboxing and benchmarks. Bye!